Australia, we have a long history, and the last few hundred years challenge us as we consider the way in which our First Nations and the more recent inhabitants of Australia have interacted with each other. We have a custom called acknowledging country. We acknowledge the First Nations and custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to stolen generation survivors. We recognise the intergenerational trauma that remains in our pledge to build a world that can heal through our unwavering commitment to truth-telling through the power of story and education. We stand in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters and work for justice and true reconciliation. This acknowledgement was drafted in consultation with Leanne Wilson, a friend of ours and a colleague of ours, a Bidjara and Karakara First Nation descendant who acknowledges her South Sea Islander heritage. In Australia, we've been gathering around the fireplace for 65,000 years or more. Our fireplace today is in Akpan in Nigeria, Hanoi in Vietnam, Southeast London in the UK, Melbourne in the second best state in Australia, and Sydney in the great state of New South Wales, the finest state in Australia. We are so excited today to have friends gathered around the fireplace to help us to think through what it means to connect and how we might do that, and in a way that truly equips, empowers, and enables children. Blessing Akpan is an educator, social entrepreneur, and founder of the Innovative Child Network. Hector Grimaldo is also an educator, an entrepreneur, an influencer, and a role model to his students. He is also one of the founders of the Innovative Child Network. And Alex Bell is the director of Portland Education. He's passionate about all sorts of things in education. I can't tell you about everything that they've done because we just don't have time. These are amazing people. I'm really excited that we've got the opportunity for RELEARN Radio and the Game Changers podcast to talk to these remarkable people today, Adriano. I can't wait. Let's go.
Phil, it's so wonderful to be with you again, and I'm really excited to have another episode, our special series episode of RELEARN Second Serve with Alex, Hector, and Blessing. And let's get straight into it after that wonderful introduction, Phil, and particularly moving in relation to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. My question is to all three of you, and that question is, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your story and ultimately how the three of you came to collaborate. But I'm more interested in that first part of the question. I might start with you, Blessing. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you've come to where you are today.
My story is about how I started to be interested in literacy and education generally. So back in my secondary school, I was always this timid kind of a student who wouldn't want to relate with other students. But to some point, I didn't know what that actually meant to my education. I didn't know that it was going to affect my education at the point negatively. And as I grew up, I realized that the way I received education, the way I engaged with my students, with my teachers, at some point affected my learning outcome. And I became curious to know what it actually means to be literate, what it actually means to be involved in shaping education. My own experience in not being outspoken shaped my perspective on how education should be for every child, on how every child should receive education. And as I grew up, I became passionate about becoming a teacher, becoming an educator, kids, and understanding their developmental differences, because every child, how they grow up affects how they learn. That actually inspired me to, I started learning about what it means to learn, what education means, and what literacy means. And after that, I got so much encouragement from my teachers, some of my teachers back then. And they always tell me, go for it, blessing, go for it, blessing. You know, back then there's usually not enough persons who would like to go for education. And me coming up to aspire to be a teacher was something so amazing. And most people cheered me up, telling me I should go for it, I should go for it. But actually why I decided to go for education, passionate about literacy, um, is that I want to go back to help my younger self. So whenever I see a child who is timid, who can speak out, is having issues learning, I remember my younger self. I'm like, oh, I remember how I felt back then, and I know that this is what this child must probably be going through, not really learning. And I believe that if I was able to come out of it, I can help another child come out of it as well.
Hector, what about you?
There's a lot of amazing energy going from Phil's campfire introduction to Blessing's real touching story.
Yeah.
And my story is that I mimicked my parents growing up. My mother was a teacher for 40 years. My father was anything from starting his own cleaning company to a firefighter to now being a director of security in the port of Mexico in Veracruz. And my father's family has always been really good at public speaking and at being the voice that people want to hear. And I never thought twice of it, but I feel that it's in my genes to speak and speak for those that, like Blessing, were timid at a young age. I've always found myself being a leader in what I do, and not only that, but trying to explore this so-called impossibility that people bestow upon themselves. When I was in university, I told myself I was going to work at Disney World, and I did. I applied to this college program and I got in. And my parents couldn't believe it, friends couldn't believe it. And after that, I told myself, I'm gonna go move to Michigan. I met this girl at Disney that I really liked.
Of
and
course.
That's all I gotta know. And I moved over to Michigan.
It wasn't Minnie Mouse, was it?
No, I wouldn't do that too much to the boss. Yeah, but every decision that I've taken to explore this, what so people called impossible, has taken me to study abroad in the Czech Republic, where I really got my first experience of being in a situation where I have no control, but I'm totally okay with it. Yeah. And through being open, social, I think that my connections, my friendships, and the people who I look up to and try to imitate have brought me and made me into who I am today. Thinking back to my old boss in El Paso, Texas, he once day showed up and he's like, Hector, starting in June, you are no longer an employee here. And I'm like, well, why? Well, he's like, well, you told me your dream about traveling, and so go do it. You will not be welcome here after that. And that was his way of encouraging me and throwing me off the side. And in a way, that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to push my students to just jump off. And if you're uncertain or you don't really know if you have what it takes, then you just got to try it. You got to dream it and you got to do it. And that's it. You will adapt on the way. That's my message to my students.
Alex, it's quite remarkable sitting here listening to both Blessing and Hector share a little bit about their story, and there is so much personal growth in what they're sharing with us here today. But there's this profound selflessness about what they are sharing, and about an empowerment, an enablement, and an engagement of other people, and helping allow others to discover their possibility. It must be delightful for you to be able to work alongside of two young, dynamic individuals that continue to have an optimism and an enthusiasm for life and living.
It absolutely is, and I think that's why we are really good friends. I mean, it's amazing. We've never actually met. Hector, Blessing, and I have never met in real life, and yet there's a huge connection. And I think there's something really remarkable about all our stories that have those common themes to them. if I can tell you my story, I grew up in southwest England, a place called Cornwall, on a beach. It took me half an hour to see any friends. I had to really kind of make an effort to go and see other kind of kids my own age. My siblings were like 6 and 8 years older than me, so there was a real desperation to kind of connect with people beyond the people on my doorstep, because they just didn't exist. And I was also the kind of kid that daydreamed out of the school window. And and I think I was kind of like told off for that for quite a while. I did all right. Years later, the view, the clay pit, the kaolin China clay pit that I sort of looked out onto from my classroom, became the world famous Eden project, which is the world's largest indoor rainforest. So that was a ridiculous dream as well. That's kind of my beacon and icon about how you can have something which you will into existence in a way. And then I had a pretty straightforward career, did pretty well becoming a teacher, and my mum was a teacher, and then a school leader, and played the game. And then it felt like I was being limited in terms of those dreams and those daydreams by people that said, oh, that's not possible, or we don't do that around here. So I had to look a bit further afield, and I built this shed in my garden in southeast London, and then literally started inviting people in and having a kind of online conversations with people, and built a tribe, which then became my coaching consultancy, and then my sort of ridiculous sort of factory of innovations and ideas of things that might just work. And a lot of them have, thank God, but some of them have been ridiculous ideas as well that haven't worked. But hey, that's the thing with innovation, you just keep going.
So perhaps you might want to then support our listeners in understanding the second part of my question initially, and that was, how did the three of you come together to be able to collaborate the way in which you do now, before I hand it over to Phil?
So yeah, we are all loosely connected to the organization called 100.org, and 100 is a hub of education innovation coming out of Finland, but looking globally, and all of us were ambassadors for 100. And then we were called together partly because of an innovation that I put together called X Talks, which Hector and Blessing are developing in Asia and in Africa. And it was the start of the lockdown. And one of our fellow founders, Lisa Gottfried in America, said, look, these kids are getting locked down. It's going to seriously affect mental health. It's going to really sort of foster even more division and all those things which were sort of occurring politically around the world. What can we do? And we didn't know what we would do, but we knew we didn't want to do something. And so we just started having Zoom conversations about, okay, right, the world's locked down. What's possible? What can we make happen without having to ask permission? And it was literally just many, many conversations, which were quite intense from March 2020 onwards, about, okay, right, let's just get some kids together. None of us was in charge. I mean, I think that the kind of concept of sort of communityship was at play there, where we just kind of showed up as we needed to and gave what we could to make this happen. And we've got some, our own kids, friends' kids, kids we knew that we taught or whatever, just to kind of hang out online. And our intention really was that it was going to be a place for sort of fellowship, a place where kids young people would just hang out and have whatever conversation they needed. We wanted it not to be school. We wanted it to be youth-led, not with a curriculum, with old guys like me kind of coming up with stuff there. And then we wanted it to go in whatever direction that they needed to, whether it was just kind of like fun respite from whatever was going on at the beginning of lockdown, or just leaning into that and delving into that and actually, talking about some of the really difficult things which were happening in their own lives. So that's how we started, really.
Tremendous. Thank you very much, Alex. It's a fabulous year to be doing those sorts of things, isn't it? Because it's a year in which you put things together on a shoestring, and on the smell of optimism and hope, and you can create remarkable things. Whether some of them fly long term or not, that's less the issue, I think. And of course you'd know that from all the activity that you've been generating. I think sometimes within a school environment, I think people struggle with that notion of research and develop and entrepreneurship, because most of the stuff you try doesn't work in the long term. But if you don't try everything, then the things that will work never emerge at the end of the day. Blessing, you are involved with a lot of different things. You have a really restless and curious mind, and you love getting into stuff. And you're into a lot of different things. What project are you engaged in right now that has a potential to be a real game changer? What do you reckon is the one thing that really should take off to create today's learning for tomorrow's world?
I don't know if to say that I'm really involved in a lot, because the communities, the project that I'm involved in are super close to my heart, and I do it consciously because I know it has the potential of inspiring learning outcome in a lot of students all over the world. So I would like to talk about not just one. I would like to talk about 3 projects right now, which has the potential of helping students learn. I want to talk about the Innovative Child Network. It started 2019. I had started my developmental work even before then, but then I saw the need for a community of like-minded young people, children in Nigeria, a platform where they can come together, share their knowledge, share skills, and also get inspired. So that was what inspired the Innovative Child Network. And what we do is through mentorship and training, we help students learn, and especially from low-income communities. And then Link Online Learner started this year. I know there is a beautiful future for the project, for the initiative, because apart from it being a response to COVID-19, it also serves as a platform where students from different countries learn about global citizenship, learn about empathy and emotional intelligence, which is very critical in today's world. So they learn about diversity and inclusion, which is also very important. And it's also important that if they learn this at a very young age, they will grow up to be leaders who are empathetic, leaders who understand the needs of citizens, leaders who prioritize the needs of humans above all. And I want to talk about X Talks as well. X Talks amplifies the voice of young people in communities, in countries who have lack access to internet connection. And this year, the Innovative Child Network partnered with X Talk to amplify the voices of students in Nigeria who shared about how the COVID-19 has affected them, a lot of things they got involved in, and how they've been able to grow because they've had connections with other students around the world. And I would say that it's important to give young people voices. Like, it's important for young people to air out what they feel, because the future of every country depends on how much a young person uh, uh, invests in his or herself. Yeah. So X Talks has given a voice to a lot of young people, and as they keep speaking up, they keep they keep telling the world what it is happening in their community, what it is they need to be changed. I know the world is getting better. For instance, in Nigeria this year, we had there was a protest going on, and it was led by young people who were calling an end to police brutality, calling an end to the reformation of a lot of government policies. And it's actually worked out because young people unified, aired out what it is they want to be changed. So this is what XOX longs to do, to give people the voice, to give them the platform to speak out, because when young people speak out, there will be change in different sectors of the economy.
I want to continue to explore this line of thinking with you, Blessing, in relation to this notion of voice. One of the things that Phil and I often talk about is that we've got to start with a sense of belonging. And I suppose so much of what Phil shared at the top of this show, and particularly acknowledgement of country, is exactly amplifying those particular thoughts. Why do you believe that we need to continue to have different voices in our world to help unlock the potential of students and their inherent possibility?
I think that we might not know what other people think if they do not speak out. we do not know what they want if they do not speak out. So it's important we give them the platform to express themselves, give young people platforms to express themselves. Because if they do not express, if they're unable to express themselves, there is a possibility that a lot of things will be static. Things will not be moving because they are not expressing themselves. I read a quote somewhere that says that you cannot deduce what a person is thinking if the person do not um, speak out, if the person do not speak out his or her thoughts. So it's very important that we give young people voices, because the nation would grow if they are given that platform and that voice.
A blessing. It's fabulous to hear you talk about the rationale for voice and diversity in voice around the world. We were doing some work with a school in Canada recently, and the board of that school, who are very good people and very interested in doing all the right sorts of things, it didn't occur to them that student voice was an important thing. You know, it was because that's not part of their world, and that is part of the world now. So it's really important that we help understand that. Hector, I wonder if we can turn to you for a moment. And earlier when I introduced you, I didn't get the name of your organization right. You are the director of Dreamland Echo English and the co-founder of Link Online Learners. It's very important that we acknowledge the specific work that you're doing there. Hector, you heard Adriano talk about belonging, and you heard Blessing talking about voice in particular, and the multitude of projects. In the work that you've been doing, and you've done work lots and lots of places around the world, what is your sense of how we can help create a sense of belonging for students in their schools, outside their schools, in their associated places of learning today? How do we promote belonging?
That would have been a difficult question a couple of months ago, but it's quite clear now. And it all started with this pandemic and schools closing down. And I started thinking of a way of offering my students to continue their development, not through boring books and grammar and all of these things, as I teach English as a second language. But I've always been very passionate. I learn by seeing, very visual, and I'm very kinetic, and I'm hands-on. And I was thinking, how can I offer these hands-on experiences to students in all over the world from the comfort of their home? And I developed this 12-topic course, going from something as simple as baking a cake in a cup in your microwave. Because, you know, we don't really think of these things, but everybody has flour. Everybody can get their hands on some eggs. And if you don't like sugar, then put some chocolate, put whatever you want in it. And the belonging is that everybody has a kitchen. Everybody's kitchen may be different. But when all of us really welcome each other into these rooms, I've seen the excitement of my students separating egg yolks and egg whites. And I really don't want to confront the parent which this happened to, but this child was so excited to share his egg yolks that he got so close to the camera that he spilled them all over his keyboard. So yeah, he logged out for a bit, but everybody had such an amazing time, because I mean, I've taught both in a kitchen and online in a virtual kitchen. And it's quite difficult to keep control of 30 people in one kitchen. But when everybody has their own supplies, their own equipment, their own this, everybody's active, everybody can really show their ideas, their creativity. And then suddenly what was supposed to be a cake turned into some kid making zombie brain, like hot chocolate marshmallow soup. And that's amazing, because that is how he wanted to pursue this. I think that the belonging is to begin seeing things that are so commonly used, everyday materials, popsicle sticks and rubber bands and all these things that seem meaningless. But when giving them to students and conducting a STEM project through online learning, then the teacher isn't this voice of dictatorship, of listen to me, and learn what is coming out of my mouth, but rather this really welcoming environment where their living room has just transformed into a laboratory, and where suddenly everybody's a top chef because it's their kitchen. They know how things work. They know that how their microwave has a little trick to it. So I think that there's the future is quite bright here. And by exploring these possibilities of things that we consider ordinary, they somehow become extraordinary when it's presented into a new platform, when it's presented into a new way. So I'm excited to keep digging and discovering this more with my students.
You know, Alex, it's interesting sitting here listening to Hector share a little bit there about the sheer beauty and simplicity, you know, and it's as complex and as simple as that. Yeah, when we're dealing particularly with young people who are inherently home to a unique life. I'm interested to hear from you now about how can we continue to help students to kind of know then what is good and right, and how they can act on this in their lives going forward.
Good and right is a really tough thing right now. And I think one of the things that's kept me going, and perhaps kept the three of us going through a really horrible, horrible year, the 2020 is, you know, with the pandemic and politically, is that I think there's something around the innocence and I call it the wisdom of youth that almost transcends all that. So one of the things that we work on is kind of getting them young to trust each other, to listen with total empathy to people from other cultures. So this idea of difference, which seems such a big deal to adults, just isn't there when you're a kid. If you're a kid, you are fascinated by somebody else's, you know, Hector said the ordinariness of your life becomes extraordinary to somebody on the other side of the world. And it's that sort of innate fascination and empathy and curiosity that I think underpins all our work, which we've done globally together and that we've done individually. That's the hope that we're building, is that I think, you know, we'll hopefully the kids that we've worked with and we're in touch with will grow up to be a generation that has a different take on what it is to be human. And it's not about self-preservation and dog eat dog and, you know, win or lose. It's about we're all in this together. And I think there's something around, you know, if we compete, nobody wins. But actually, if we listen with open hearts and empathy, then somehow we can pull through. And you know, we've got really tangible examples of that. So I think there's the goodness is actually to make sure we start with that with kids.
One of the things that has become really apparent to Phil and I this year through our work with the School for Tomorrow is that we have a little platform once a week where we highlight a young person. They could be a student in their final year of secondary school or in the first few years of their tertiary or apprenticeship or whatever it might be. The common thread amongst these young people is exactly what you just shared there, is they operate from a position of whole hearts. You know, they have brave conversations and there's a real willingness. But again, there's a selflessness that they're so in tune and they have a consciousness about the other, about the planet, about the, you know, the state of the world that I haven't seen in 26 years of education. It's really been amplified. And I wonder if things like technology has enabled more young people to see what's going on and empower themselves through their own knowledge curation and to marry that with their inherent curiosity. And I'm learning from them all the time. You know, that's what I think is really powerful, that we can never be closed to the possibility of others and how we can grow with them. And I love this kind of selflessness that I'm seeing with them on a regular basis.
And I think a really great point you've made. I'm quite an old guy, I'm 55. And as I said before, I grew up on this beach. And I think what's powerful now about technology is that I would have a kind of like a musing, like, you know, like a sort of like young kids or teenagers do, that kind of like making sense of the world. And I was on my own doing that. I think now it's really possible to try out those thoughts, to share those musings with others around the world from really diverse settings. And then, you know, there's nothing more powerful than being heard and acknowledged and validated. So, you know, I was the kind of kid that had to kind of go through that on my own, and then I might try it out, and it might not, you know, my culture may not have accepted it or whatever. But I think here we've got kids who are using the technology to kind of fine tune their own humanity in a really diverse global way. And I think that's the power of the technology, is it instantly, you know, we're in all parts of the globe today and we are thinking loud together.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, that's the magic.
Yeah. My final question to you, Alex, before I hand it over to Phil to continue a conversation around collaboration with Blessing and Hector, is what's something that you once believed about education that you now no longer believe in, and what changed your mind?
I used to believe that somebody was in charge. I used to believe that the government knew what they were doing. I used to believe that my bosses knew what they're doing. And then as soon as I realized, actually, no, it starts with the child. The child is right. The child is always right. And then we build the system and the responses from that. That's what I now believe. So like, I'm not saying, you know, I mean, my day job as a coach, I've got one foot within my jurisdiction here and the other countries I work with, but I've also got one foot beyond that, dreaming big. And I think that's what I believe now, is that we and the child are in charge, not some, you know, other, and whatever the other is, the jurisdiction or the boss.
No.
Hector, I wonder if I might just get you to pick up on that response from Alex a little bit. If we're not in charge, and good Lord, I'm not in charge, I'm certainly not in charge of anything, really. If we're not in charge, but it's the learners who are in charge, what does it take to create conditions for learning through which these learners might actually fulfill their potential? What do we need to do for them?
You know, my students range from 4 to 16 years old, and they have a few things in common, and that is video games and YouTubers, and this interest into something that maybe us as educators don't really see much value in, or we may see it as distraction or something that shouldn't really be paid much attention to. But in reality, there's always something behind, maybe under the rock, that we're not seeing. Because maybe students, without even knowing, like subconsciously, they understand that this is the future by seeing the reality and the online era that is supercharging under our feet, under our keyboards. They're maybe choosing to go more online because they see more collaboration. They see an easier way to connect, to share, to like a certain video, and to then enter this community that follows this idea, this project, this whatever. So by hearing these students, you know, Vietnamese education is very standardized. There's a test score, you gotta study for it, you gotta ace it, and then you gotta keep studying, and homework never ends. So there's not really like a meet the student halfway kind of system. And that's where a lot of students are starting to see school as a chore, something that they must do. It's demanding. I have to get through this for the next 18 years, rather than exploring their own limit of their imagination. We have had the amazing opportunity to work with some amazing schools from around the globe, and they have some incredible stories, going from 14-year-olds building a satellite to launch into space from Cambodia. And they're just self-powered and self-fueled because this is what they found, their niche. This is the tribe that they found that they want to collaborate with. And that's what Blessing was talking a lot about, is that when you get to speak out, you suddenly see that you're not alone in your interest. You start formulating ideas of how you and I could learn from you. And that is just going to create, to be honest, I can't even put it into an image in my mind of what education will look like in 5 years. We're seeing it start, but this could potentially expand at the speed of a black hole. I mean, really eager, exciting to be in a seat of this, to see it firsthand and see it happening.
Oh, I love the passion, man. That's absolutely fantastic. That's terrific. Hey, Blessing, what have you learned this year about collaboration and about the way in which people can work with each other to achieve the sort of remarkable outcomes that Hector's been talking about?
I believe that being alone, you can't achieve much, But if you were with other people who have the same interests, you can achieve so much. And this year, collaboration has taught me so much. I have actually stretched myself beyond the limit I had expected because I came in contact with other like-minded people like Hector and Alex Bell. Whenever I see the work they do, and I'm like, wow, I think I need to really do much. I felt like, before now I used to feel that I am actually doing something. I'm doing something. But then when I met Alex, I felt like I'm not really doing anything at all. And that energy keeps pushing me. And it has helped me realize so much this year. And whenever I look back at it, and I'm just like, wow, did I really do this? And another thing collaboration does is that if you work with one or two persons apart from like yourself, you realize that you get to effect quality change in the society, quality change in any area you all are working on. I think taking Lincoln Line learners in perspective, I believe that if it was one or two persons who were working on it, I felt like we wouldn't have actually gone this far. But about 10 to 15 educators all over the world coming together to work, and it felt like, wow, the change was super amazing. And realize we've reached out to a lot of students in over 30 countries, and that's the power of collaboration. And collaboration also, when we have different minds with diversity come together with their different ideas, there is a great change because all of us are coming from different communities. All of us are coming with our different experiences, and we bring our mind together, and there is a greater outcome. So collaboration this year has taught me that if you want to go far, you have to not go alone.
Mm.
So if we're going to
Beautiful.
gather, if we're going to gather around the fire together, and our hearts meet, then our minds can meet, and then we can do remarkable things together. Eh? I feel the energy in this conversation with all three of you is just remarkable. It's just a privilege to be part of. One last question for all of you. We're going to start with Blessing because I know you're on very, very low battery right now, and you might disappear in the middle of your answer, which would be really sad. And then we're going to go to Alex, and then we're going to finish up with Hector. Blessing and Alex and Hector, what does the world need now?
People who think like humans. The world needs people who are ready to unlearn and relearn. The world needs versatile humans. A lot of things are happening in the world because people have some funny ideas about how things should be done. The idea they had 5 years ago is what they still stick to, not knowing that the world has changed. What the world needs now is that just people who are really ready to learn about the new strategies and engage them. The world generally needs people who are versatile.
Wow.
Big challenge for you now, Alex, to follow that
Alex?
Here we go. Here we go. The world needs. I'm going to give my best shot. It needs authenticity. You can see it behind me here. It's my strap line for my coaching work. I think if people are true to themselves, to their indigenous cultures, true to their humanity, then authenticity will win through. We need people to have courage. I think, the whole situation of 2020 politically and with the pandemic means that we have to be braver than ever. So let's keep going beyond that, beyond the need to be brave, but just be brave and courageous. And also we need to give each other permission just to keep going. So not wait for permission from somebody in charge, as I said before, but I'm going to do it. Who's with me? And I think Blessing, Hector, and I are great examples of let's just go for it and then see what happens.
All right, Hector, you're up.
Just for the record, I have been thinking of my answer. I've been actually just so motivated of what Blessing and Alex are sharing. So here goes nothing. But it all goes back to what I said before, that dreamers are doers. And it's not like none of us, all of us have a dream. And all of us have this passion and this skill that many of other people maybe are not aware of, because you haven't had the platform or the opportunity to share your designing skills in a classroom, or you haven't been able to show how amazing you are at molding clay because you've never been giving this clay. I think that what the world needs now is 30 minutes a day. And what I mean by that is, if we were all to log in online for 30 minutes a day into whatever tribe, campfire, into whatever group that really ignited our passion. If some of us would go into entrepreneurship for 30 minutes a day, if some of us would to log into art 30 minutes a day, I could only imagine how much momentum this would create. And they would just put aside all this, who's in charge, like Alex is speaking about, like, then suddenly humanity wouldn't need this political figure to criticize or to complain about. But rather, if we reciprocate all of these emotions and all of these comments that we're sharing behind the screen, if we were actually to be able to turn those comments and those waste of time into 30 minutes of action a day, I mean, wow, we would be having this conversation with aliens in like 2 years. Like, we would really go that far.
You know, Phil, it's been remarkable sitting here, you know, in Melbourne, listening to these three wonderful humans whose vision for tomorrow is human-centered. It's highly purpose-driven, and of course, it's augmented through technology. But above all that, it's littered with kindness and compassion that's on steroids. It has been a great pleasure, Alex, Blessing, and Hector, to encounter your kind of world. And it's a world that is filled with great optimism for a future that is about our collective humanity. And for me today, what's really struck out is that you are examples of the reason why we exist is because of each other, not in spite of one another. And I just want to say thank you very much for giving us an insight into not only your thinking, but your glorious humanity. And I wish you well through the RELEARN Festival. And of course, I look very much forward to the opportunity to one day that we can encounter each other in person. If not, I think a trip to England, to Vietnam, or Nigeria is just as bloody exciting as coming together here in Australia. So thank you very much for everything that you continue to do.
Thank you so much. The game is changing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone. Thank you.
The Game Changers podcast is produced by Oliver Cummins for Orbital Productions. It's powered by schoolfortomorrow.com and circle.education. It's available on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, on Spotify, and on Google. If you like what you hear, tell your friends, subscribe, like, you know what to do. Let's go.